There he is.
Hey Lars, how you doing?
How's it going, Jeff?
Good, good. Uh, I think did you have a birthday this week or last week?
Yeah, this week, 3 days ago, the
Hey,
22nd. But you know
yeah,
what, man? Normally birthdays, it's like, yeah, happy birthday, let's go. I
yeah,
was not doing a lot of freaking smiling. You know why? I'm getting a little older,
yeah, that happens.
and it's like, cool. I'm 24, man. It's like it's kind of a reminder of like get your shit together. At least
Oh,
for me, I don't know. It's just kind of how it felt. It's like it's not that cool that I'm 24. It's not a cool age.
it's yeah, it's an interesting time, but I think you've got a few more years of runway in terms of getting things together. But yeah, you are entering maybe that runway where the whole birthday thing takes a little less, I guess, significance in a way, it's
Hmm.
which is natural. It's natural.
Yeah,
But I think it also it does help you realign goals a bit, because all of a sudden you're kind
that's
of like, all right,
true.
it used to be kind of just a simple day, you just had some very, low hanging fruit you had on your priority list, but now it's becomes more meaningful because you are thinking about, what's the next thing, right? For me.
That's absolutely right.
And obviously, it's this YouTube recording we do every week. I think that's the first thing on the list, right?
It absolutely is. That's one of the higher hanging ones.
That's right. That's right. Uh, well, anyway, well, happy birthday, and
Appreciate it.
hope all is well otherwise. And um, yeah, I actually I wanted to keep the element of surprise going, so I haven't. I saw you sent over some finds, but I kind of purposely didn't look at them once I sent over the invite. Now I'm just digging in. Oh, this is nice. These
Yeah,
are some.
we got some fun ones, and I kind of have a point to make about all these. There's like kind of a theme that I want to follow. Not that I want to follow, but I chose them in mind with like, okay, it's going to be fun to kind of discuss this aspect of this particular vehicle. So I think we'll have kind of a fun one today.
Yeah, that this looks great. So thanks for grabbing these. I'm gonna
Absolutely.
share the screen here and let's see, get these up here. Uh, Here we go. Okay, so let's do this, but we'll start with the first card you sent over, which is one of my favorites. Uh,
Awesome.
1990 Porsche 911 Carrera 2. So Larson's 146,000. Wow. Since these are your picks, I'm going to let you, take the lead on each one, and I'll respond thereafter. So what caught you on this one besides the eye-watering sale price?
Yeah, so I was kind of trying to find. I actually came into this. I was looking for an older 911 because I think these cars are probably arguably one of the things that have just absolutely blown up in price. You probably know this better than me because you've kind of been into the car scene a little bit longer. But people looking for these now, I mean, here's the thing: you can still find some of these, pre 1990, 1995, or I should just say air cooled Porsches for under 100,000. But a lot of them, this is a obviously a clean model. It's low mileage. It's pretty well original, but the question is now with these, obviously they're, regarded as some of the better driving sports cars you can buy from any time period. But something I kind of want to discuss, and I'll let you take over here once I pop the question, is it coming to a point on these where it's like, okay, these things are really cool, they're really sought after, and they're never going to make anything like this again.
Right.
But where do you hit the point where it's just unreasonable to buy? I mean, for 150 G's, it's a cool car,
Hmm.
but 150 G's, I mean, when is it gonna, where do you draw the line? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are have the same question, right? Because uh, what's really surprising about these is there was a time wherein this is the 964 chassis 911.
Yep.
These were pretty unloved. Like when they first came out, they had a lot of kind of teething issues, if you will. The Particularly the Carrera 4, it had an all-wheel drive system that really at the time was sort of derided by road test editors, just saying it's a very numb driving experience. It doesn't let the driver really connect to the chassis in a meaningful way. And So I mean, but I mean that was also the first iteration of a four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive system in a 911. So you kind of got to give them
Yeah.
some slack for that. But more than anything else, there was a time I still remember where the 964 was the car you could buy for 10 or 15,000, and it wasn't because of inflation or other economic forces. It was just because it wasn't really anyone's favorite 911.
Yeah.
Uh, so now, to some extent, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot of folks just realizing they're not going to make these in quite this way ever again. And I have always thought what made these cars sort of, people forgave their shortcomings. And I don't think the Carrera 2 had nearly as many gripes from drivers, but this was kind of the last time it was really the classic 911 shape. I mean, some people would say the 993 was that, but I would argue the 964 was closer to being what first blew everybody's minds in the late 60s, early 70s. So I think that triggers a lot of emotions for people when they look at these cards, to the point that they're kind of able to overlook some of the dynamic shortcomings. Because honestly, if you want what I think most people would agree is the best air cooled 911, I mean, this price will buy you a really nice 993. And the 993 really was, it was, spiritually, it was checked all the boxes, but it was also a really great driving car, which, some people might say the 964 didn't quite have that, that meter all the way pegged. So yeah, I think, to me, this is slightly crazy money for what was not the best 911.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have a bunch of experience with these cars. I've really never driven an air-cooled 911, but and I also should mention, I kind of chose one, a little theatrical. I chose one that was a little expensive here at $146,000. You could find one cheaper than this, but you're not going to find one like way cheaper than this. You know what I mean?
Right.
At least for something in similar condition. And I think a lot of these cars, people still regard them and people still buy them as driver cars, something that you're actually going to be driving. But I think as this trend becomes a little bit more steady and you see these kind of bump into the six figures, I doubt people will continue driving them for much longer unless they've
Yeah.
owned them for an extended period of time. Because like for example, the guy who bought this for 150, do I see him driving it a lot? Maybe, but also at the same time, it's probably going to be sitting in some
Right.
air controlled garage with a bunch of other classics. So
Well,
I it's sad to say, but one of the best driver's cars, arguably ever, might be kind of switching into a non-driver now into a collectible. And I'll
yeah.
ask you, Jeff, if you had 150 G's, is this what you're ending up with? Maybe not.
Yeah, it
Maybe
would
not.
be it would be so I will say, for sure, the thing about a 911, and this is what makes them such a fantastic car across the board, is that they only go up. I mean, it's like
Totally.
the most
Totally.
recession proof car you could buy. And that's to its credit. And that is
Look at it. He says no recession
no
for 960, but he loves it. It's your bang on.
and and I kind of get it too, because as you look at like how so many manufacturers are not supporting their older models. I mean, Porsche really kind of becomes the beacon in the night, right? Where it's like, okay, they're going to keep making the parts. I mean, hell, you drive down to Inskip on a weekday, and there's still an 86 911 park, in the service lane. Like, I mean, that's crazy to me, because, like,
That is true.
Inskip in general doesn't want to deal with older cars, right? But and you're not going to see that at BMW, or maybe once in a while, but you're not going to see that at the Lexus or the Infiniti. But you go over to the Porsche lane, and there's always going to be an air cooled model sitting there getting serviced, and that to me is so telling, because again, dealerships like that, they don't want to deal with something that causes them to like drop everything and spend 3 hours doing diag work because it doesn't hook up to a computer, but they'll do it for Porsche, because they have made that clear. We are not leaving those folks behind. So if you're
I
looking
love
at
it.
I mean, that's really the kind of the revelation I've come to, because for years I was like, God, I hate the fact that these cars have gotten so expensive, but I get it because you're watching everything else kind of fold by the wayside. I mean, even that Audi S6 I have, like, Audi will not sell their vintage parts to North American customers. Like, they have this whole awesome repository called Audi Heritage Parts, and they will not let you, if you have a shipping address in the United States, they will not sell you the parts. And it's just like,
Really?
yeah, it's so overt that they just don't want to deal with it. They don't want to service the old car. They just want to move past them. So if you're someone like us
Yeah, I
and you're
didn't real. I actually, that's a really valid point. I didn't realize that, especially about the servicing. But you're right. I'll see. There's a red one I've actually seen there a few times of this generation. So
yeah.
that's a really good point.
So if you're a gearhead and you're looking at a car that, if you got to sell everything else and know that you can still be driving it 20 years from now and you're still going to be able to buy parts for it and someone's still going to service it, what else are you going to buy? So
You
again,
got me there.
yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. 150,000, I wouldn't want to pay this much for a 964, but um, I would pay that for a really nice 993. I mean, 100%. So, which is kind of not that far
It's really
throw from
not. It's
the,
almost subjective which one's better at that point.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, it's amazing. It really is to think how cheap these were not that long ago.
Yeah, and before we move off this one, last thing I'll say, I don't want it to come off like I'm saying, oh, you know what, these things are ruined. They're just going to be sitting in the
No,
garage, even though it's kind of true.
right.
It's just kind of crazy to see how strong the cult following has gotten for these, and the fact that they can pull in this much money. So, like you said, it's recession proof. But in the next 5-10 years, when this exact model is 200 plus,
I know. Yeah,
we'll see how much of them you actually see at the car shows and everything. Hopefully they're still on the road being driven.
yep. But you're right. We're not far off from that number.
Yeah.
Let's see. So next one up. Okay. Wow, 13,000 didn't, yeah, this is, I'll let you, I've got thoughts already, but I'm glad we're putting some no sales in here, because that I think is just as interesting as the big dollar sales. So what here caught your eye?
So I've always had kind of an interest in these. I've always thought these were really cool, and I've watched some videos on them in the past. I've gotten some information on them, and it actually sounds like these things are pretty reliable. They kind of follow that Toyota reliability. Obviously, there's going to be some more advanced features for the time, so maybe not as reliable as a Camry or something. But I love the idea of this comfortable, classy, luxurious, like presidential suite car,
Yeah.
but it's a Toyota. And I don't really know too much about these. I actually kind of picked this one out because I had a feeling you might kind of be able to clue me in on these a little bit. But I was also surprised to see for 13 grand, it was no one was willing to go any higher. And last point I'll make, the previous listing you just showed with the 964, it kind of makes it look like the market is absolutely crazy right now. I think that's separate, but as I was scrolling through some of these auctions, I'm seeing a lot of cars as this one really not selling and only being bid up to a number which I would say is pretty low. So what do you think? My biggest question for you is, why do you think this one didn't end up, bringing home
Yeah.
too much money? Because it looks like people thought it would in the comments.
Yeah. So I have a lot of, I think about the JDM market vehicles. I really, for one thing, I think the most obvious problem is, and without concern about economic factors, is that we've just kind of gotten bloated on the JDM stuff. Like, there was a time where you saw one of these and you're like, oh wow, it's the only one in the country. That thing's awesome. I got to have it. But now so many guys, so many individuals are getting into the importing business that it's not that uncommon to see one now. And so you
Good
kind of
point.
have, the novelty factor is wearing off. And I also don't think anyone really knows really what is a good price for one of these, because they weren't, they're slightly unusual here, but they weren't really in their home country. So um unlike the 964, where you kind of have this really clear idea, okay, like we're not making any more of these. This car, has these qualities and characteristics that make Porsche sought after. We don't really have that same kind of connection with something like a Toyota Century. It's you summed it up in a great way, which is that if you just want kind of an interesting, off the beaten path, modern classic that is going to be super reliable to drive, just kind of turnkey. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. But I think the other thing we're seeing in terms of what you mentioned about other cars in this bracket not selling
Yep.
is for the past 2 to 3 years, guys who had, well, let's say upper middle class income, and they had 20 grand to play with at a given time, who might go out and buy one of these. I think those individuals are a little bit spooked right now, right? Whereas that 964,
Yep.
top of the heap guys, they're still in a position financially where they're either invested well, or they they're in an industry that is financial services, what have you. If you're dropping 164,000 on a 911, an older 911 that's not a particularly collectible model, then you're in a unique financial position. Whereas that same buyer is not going to be in this auction. So you're talking about a different kind of buyer for this one that is not, probably isn't as recession proof. So I think you're going to keep seeing those cars in that that 15 to 25, 15 to 30 range, that would, typically that's who is showing up and buying them, that those individuals are a little bit, are being really cautious right now. So I think that, a couple things working against it. Just, again, and final thought is that in general, the JDM vehicles are always going to be a little bit of a tough sell, because I think people just, unless they really had a connection to this vehicle, I think the right-hand drive configuration scares people off. I think parts availability scares people off, and so and then also at the end of the day, if you're going to live with those potential drawbacks, do you want it to be in a big, heavy, floaty, luxury sedan? Or, I think if you're going to live with those pain points, you might be more inclined to look at a Skyline or a Supra, or, an RX-7, something like that, that even though you could get it here, it's really hard to come by. It's a bummer for the seller. It looks like this car, you bought it for 15 grand not too long ago, and now it's not getting past 13.
Yep.
But I think you're going to kind of continue seeing a bit of a fracturing for vehicles in this segment.
Yeah, really great point, Jeff, about how the demographic of people who are, maybe saving their hard-earned cash and splurging on something like this are going to be more affected by, the financial state that we're in right now as a country, and, the way everything is, as opposed to the guy who has 150 G's to just get his dream car just because it popped up on the auction.
Yeah,
Um, Regardless of the state of the economy, he's probably going to have money regardless.
right.
He's going to have some money to spend. So I think that's a really good point on that. And then also to follow up what you said, obviously, a lot of these imports, it comes down to the 25-year rule. So like, this is when I was just starting to get into cars, but I remember like always seeing that they were starting to import like the Skylines and the R32s and the R33s. Or actually, that was much more recent, but they were starting to import some of those Japanese cars. And I think when that happened, 8 to 10 years ago, and that was starting to boom off, it was a really cool and popular thing to
Right.
get one of these right-hand drive imports. And like you said, a little while ago, it's like there's only two in the country. You've probably never seen one before. Whereas, as they get imported more and more, it's a little bit more common. And that because the only reason you get something like this is because it's like, wow, you've never seen
Yeah,
this before,
right.
so that is kind of starting to wear off and lose its shine. And that's a point I really didn't think about, but I think you basically nailed it on that.
Well, and two, you feel really bad for the people who, like, 5 to 7 years ago, when there was only one coming in, they spent 25 grand on one,
Oh
because
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
you're not going
Well,
to
what are you
see
gonna
that
do?
money back. Yeah.
No, probably not.
And and it's kind of I think the other side of it too is that the businesses or entities that are importing them, Yeah, they're not dummies. They're getting them for a very low price,
Mhm.
because they understand how, particularly as it relates to the yen, like they're using the strength of the dollar against the yen to buy for a far lower price than what they're obviously selling it for, which is not, the point of any good business. But for the buyers of these cars that think, oh, this is a bargain at 15,000, I'm probably gonna be able to sell it for 20. It's like, well, no, because it didn't. The math never really started there. Maybe it started at they bought it for 8,
Mm.
and the importer bought it for 8. Obviously, had to pay to bring it over here, but again, those guys have contract with shipping agents and whatnot, so they bring all those down to a manageable number. So I can't say for sure, but I have a feeling that some of the funny math with these is the first buyer or the second buyer here in the States is thinking that they're at a great price of entry point price wise, but they don't realize that the importer actually got it for far less.
Yeah.
So any sense of, oh, I'm below the envelope in terms of what it's worth, it's kind of, I was like, how do you know? I don't think anyone really knows what it should be worth. Our pricing guides for collector vehicles here, they don't have a guidepost on what these cars are worth. The only one I've really seen are the ones that are imported at a very high volume, where they can kind of start tracking the results. Like the Honda Beat is that little kind of key car. It's a two-seater. You know, there,
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's a ton of those here, so there's some measurement that's possible, but I don't think you can do it yet with something like this.
Yeah, agreed. Well said. And kind of to comment on what you say, those Kai cars are getting real popular, especially at the meets,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
cars and coffee and stuff. You see a bunch of them now. I actually think those are pretty cool. You can get them for a cool low price, and it's a fun little thing to put around in. Probably get 50 miles to the gallon, but yeah, kind of off topic. I got carried away on that one.
No, but I think those actually, I think if you're in the space, I think those actually make more sense as a car to buy
They kind
because
of make a lot of sense.
yeah, if it helps in terms of like thinking about like who's going to buy it after you. It's like, well, it kind of appeals to people who might want a Miata alternative. It appeals to people who just want something that is economical. It appeals to people who want something that they can park in a corner of their garage and not take up the other two spaces. So I think if you're hot for a JDM car, that's a far smarter place to play right now. Plus, the buying is lower.
Absolutely, yeah. You can actually pick some of those up for pretty cheap, and they're all like, it's not like they're rusted out with 150K on them. They're
No,
all low
no,
miles with no rust. It's definitely an interesting bid, you know?
yeah, I agree. Um, but yeah, not surprised to see the no sale here. I think we're gonna keep seeing cars in this bracket have some of those struggles. So, all right, final one. Ooh, Maserati Mexico,
Woo!
125. Boy,
Look at that thing.
that's a stunner.
It really is.
Yeah.
So this one I chose the thing that stood so that when I'll be honest, when I was scrolling through Bring a Trailer auctions tonight, what I always do, I go through completed. Um,
Hmm.
maybe at some point I'll send some in that are like in progress and we can kind of predict what we think is going to end up happening. But I just go through completed auctions and I see what kind of catches my eye. First thing that caught my eye was the way this thing looked. If you
Hmm.
click on any of those pictures, just like the side profile or even the front, I mean, it is just, to me, that is a gorgeous car.
Yeah.
It's a 67, which for me kind of reminds me of that like muscle car, Mustang, Camaro, Z28, Boss 302. And it's almost has that similar body shape too.
Hmm.
I did a little comparison. So in 67, the Boss 302 made 290 horsepower, right around there, right under 300. This one in the 4.2 makes 260. They also had a 4.7, which made 290. So it was almost like a competitor to the American, the Mustangs and the Camaros of that time with that two-door kind of mean big tail. It's a 155-mile-an-hour car. I think it's so classy. They only made around 500 of these. Most of them were the 4.7 liter or the 4.2 liter by a big majority. But I just thought this thing was so cool, and it's kind of nice to see how Italy did their, sports muscle car back in the late 60s, early 70s. So yeah, what do you think about this one?
Yeah. This is there's some interesting things going on here that I wanted. Wow, this guy's annoyed at something that happened, but
Yeah, yeah. I saw that too. I did not read that part, Jeff. I actually did not notice that.
um,
Yeah, these guys are being philosophical. Huh?
um,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, well, this
Yeah,
is
that's a
the
fair point.
topic for another day, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
we'll
mean
talk.
that's
Yeah, we could talk. We could do a whole episode on that.
oh yeah. So this is interesting. I don't really know the market for these that well. What I've always, stunning result, highest prices ever for Mexico. You know, these Maseratis are kind of funny because much like the Maseratis of today, they they come out with, they sound incredible, they're muscular, they're beautiful, and then it's kind of like the bottom falls out a little bit. Like they're not quite a Ferrari, they don't have that even though they're so closely aligned. I mean, there was a lot of component sharing back in the day.
Absolutely.
Not a Lamborghini of the same vintage, um, but I think that almost makes them a little bit under the radar right now. That they're just these actually, this era of Maserati, unlike the garbage they put out today,
Horrible.
these were beautiful cars. These were coach built cars. And I mean, not in a literal sense, but just, hand built, handcrafted. The styling was, and I agree with you. I think this car is such a unique blend of, I mean, it's so different than everything else that was being made at the time because this is like, it's like a brute brute in a suit. Like it's just it's kind of like simultaneously like stodgy and stunning because it's got
Hmm.
like this, if you're building a sports car in the 70s, you were trying to go for more aerodynamic, not less. And like the fact that thing is so upright and just so squared off. But I mean, it's like having it's just like squared off jaw. I mean, I love how muscular it looks, and then you still have, the must-have Italian touches, the Barani, wire wheels with the knockoff hubs, those pretty chrome bumpers before the United States started slapping ugly U.S. spec safety bumpers on everything.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah, this, and I know the fact like this is how low it comes from the factory. It just in the 60s, just a different time. But I think this is actually a pretty smart buy. And my final thought is on this is what we'd call a 2+2, right? It's the car with the back seat, two door with the back seat, and this is sort of an untapped market in a way right now, and much like what we're seeing with some of the Porsche results now, like it's kind of like if you want to get into a 911, you're going to have to go to a few different places that haven't already blown up. If you are a big fan of Italian sports cars of a certain era, I mean, you can't touch anything by Lamborghini with two seats, and a similar same story for Ferrari. Ferrari, you can't really touch much of anything these days. But the 2+2 configuration, which was kind of for years derided as not as sexy, not as desirable, all of a sudden it starts to look like a really smart place to put your money. Um,
Yep.
because again, this relative to what some of the like a Ferrari Daytona, for example, sells for, which I think is pretty reliably $500,000 and up these days.
Yeah.
This looks like an absolute bargain. Now, final thought is that, and this goes back to what I was saying about Maseratis, is you shouldn't buy one of these in uh, basket case form as they sometimes do show up because they haven't gotten to that point of being a
What,
half a
like
million
poor
dollar.
condition?
Yeah, poor condition. Non-running, destroyed interior, sun damage, paint gone, that sort of thing. Because as you can see here, people are calling 125,000 a strong result for one of these. So to restore a car of this nature properly, you're going to be over that or very close to that number in a heartbeat. Whereas, to use the Daytona example, if you sell a nice one for, $750,000, you can probably sink 300 grand into the restoration and still be okay. this is not a car you can do that with. So that's just the one thing about one of these is buying one that's done is a smart play.
Yeah, that's actually a phenomenal point. And I was thinking that I was looking through the 911s, because I was looking for 911s so we could talk about that 964. And when you see those shells sell, like a rusty shell with no drivetrain or anything, sell for, 30, 40 grand, it's like, geez, man, you really got to have some faith. I guess this
Yeah,
isn't a car you'd want to dump 100 into, because unless you got it for free, you're probably not going to recoup any of that.
right.
Um, but yeah, I just think it's kind of the attention to detail. Here, Jeff, go to if you can go, it's the gauges. It's photo 89. I don't know how hard that's going to be. Yeah, it's right down there. It's the close up.
Where?
A two more over.
Two more over. Yeah.
So sorry to be like.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
look at all the attention to detail. Look at that oil pressure is measured in kilograms per centimeter squared.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just there's so much on here, and all those little lights. I think those represent maybe if like something is broken, like a
Yeah,
check
like a
engine light,
warning light. Yeah.
warning light. But I just think in the whole interior of this thing. I mean, you can get off this photo now if you want to scroll around a little bit. But the whole interior of this thing, like you said, Coach made those switches. I bet those are the most satisfying
Oh
switches to
yeah.
flip.
Right.
You know what I mean? And today, the Maserati, what is it, the Gran Turismo, the Ghibli? No, the Gran Turismo is the last one from Maranello. But the
Yeah.
Ghibli, it's they share all the window switches with a Dodge Dart. I don't know if you,
I have heard there was some pretty awful component sharing there.
and it's just how much things have changed. Um, and again, to your
Yeah.
point, I'm kind of reiterating everything you said because you nailed so much good stuff that I'm basically going to defer to you. It's under the radar. I mean, this thing sold
Yeah.
for 130 grand. It's a 60s two-door coupe with a carbureted V8 and a stick, and I had no freaking idea the thing even existed. But yeah, I think it's a really cool car. I think it's a pretty cool buy. They only made 480, 490 of them, something like that. So you're probably not going to see too many of them pop up. I think there's only 3 that I saw in Bring a Trailer because I wanted to look and see how the other one sold. But what's that? A picture of it, of one back in the day?
I don't
I
know if
love those
that's
retro.
or if this was the original color. I don't know. I probably not. No, it looks like they uploaded an entire factory manual here, which is kind of weird. I've never seen Bring a Trailer do this. I thought these were service records, but they're not. They're just it's an engine diagram.
Oh yeah, it is,
It's
huh?
just factory manual rather, which I guess
Yeah, it is. Huh.
I don't know how,
Interesting.
and I can't figure this photo. I don't know what I'm looking at here. This looks
Like
like
the
what?
auction block, right?
Well, it looks like this guy then maybe Scottsdale at the Meekum auction or Barrett Jack, whatever's going on this week, but who knows? But anyway, this yeah, I think this was a great one to capture because I think we oftentimes forget there's still a lot there's still some value in cars of this vintage, and you and I are not going out and buying one of these, but if you had the means, I think you got to call this well bought. And I hate to be one of those guys because it drives me nuts on Bring a Trailer when someone pays too much money. Everyone's like, "Oh, well bought, well bought." But this was well bought, and if for no other reason than to get this kind of driving enjoyment, in this segment of Italian, vintage Italian cars, it's going to be hard pressed to replicate it for this kind of money. So, yeah, I think this was a great one to call out, and it just makes me want something old and Italian even more.
Yeah, totally. I think if you were to be driving this on the street, you get a lot of car guys that you drive by and they would turn around and say, "What the hell was that?"
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe I'm in the minority here, of not really knowing exactly what this is, but I just think it's such a cool and unique car. And you get caught up today with all these, like the older air cooled 911s. It's the coolest thing ever. But I mean, if you go to a Cars and Coffee, you see 40 of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like stop because I don't know what the interior looks like. I don't know what it looks like under the hood. So I think there's kind of that factor of the unknown, which makes it even that much more appealing. I don't know what this thing would sound like. I don't know what it would smell like. et cetera, et cetera. With the old
Wonderful.
911 or old BMW, I kind of know what to expect. But yeah, I thought that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm kind of rambling now, but because I see we still have 5 minutes, I'm like, let me keep going.
Well, no, but and I would say too, in terms of the three cars you showed here, like this to me is still a better value than. Well, let me step back. I was about to say it's a better value than a 964, but and
But
here's I think the 964 will outpace this car in terms of long-term value. I mean, it blows my mind to say that, but you're also talking about an era of car that is kind of. I mean, listen, everyone they're always going to collect vintage Italian cars. That's a given, but
mm,
we're moving past that now, right? Where I mean, if you
yeah,
said 20 years ago to a guy in the street who invested in classic cars that a 964 chassis 911 would outsell a Maserati Mexico by over 30,000,
yeah, 30. Yep.
30, or by $30,000, they would have said you're an idiot. They absolutely would have laughed in your face. They would have said no way. Um, but now here we are. So it turns. The value question is funny here because in this value in terms of driving enjoyment for money spent, I might give the nod to the Mexico in terms of if you're talking about value in terms of long-term projections on ROI, I would say it's the 964 all the way.
Yeah, I agree. And something again to that 911. I mean, dude, you know what? I'll say this here right now because this is going to be like a time capsule. And obviously, we've all thought this 100 times, but like, good. You switch back to it. Good, Jeff. In like 20, 30 years, it's going to be like, man, remember when you could buy one of those for like 110? And we were
Yeah.
all like, dude, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Man, we should have just like taken out a personal loan and got one. Because,
Well,
dude, in 20 years, there's no way this thing isn't 400 grand, half a million. There's just no freaking way with the way things are going in 20, 30 years when everything's electric and
right.
the new 911 is, a triple motor, all wheel drive, electric, whatever. This thing is going to be up there in the prices.
Oh yeah, it's that they're all going to be, and not that I want to boast, but this may be a good time to tell you something.
No, I was actually going to spend our last few minutes asking you about that. Already know you're going with it. Talk to me. Talk
Uh,
to me.
I don't know if am I still sharing the screen or let me
No, it's doing that. This is
oh
what happened
yeah,
last time. It's like when you switch tabs initially, it doesn't.
yeah.
You have to. I think you have to reshare. Oh, did you?
Yeah, so that gets here tomorrow.
No way.
Yeah, I had been watching this car on the Porsche Club America classifieds for a couple
You
weeks,
dog.
and it's just it was just it's a driver, has 130,000 miles on it, but it's been maintained, and I had a pre-purchase inspection done on it, a very light pre-purchase inspection, but
Where's
one
it from?
Georgia.
Yes.
It checked all the boxes. The 99, it's a seat, it's a Carrera 2, so two-wheel drive.
Yep.
The 99 was the last, not that I'll ever notice this, but the 99 was the last year of the had a cable actuated throttle as opposed to drive-by-wire.
Yep.
So slightly more manual controls. The IMS bearing has already been done. It still has some residual oil leaks, but they kind of all do.
They all do. They all do. What are you gonna do?
So it's a great color, and it was just yeah. So I mean I made an offer on it, and we went back and forth, and I got it for what I think is a really good price, and certainly a number that I per our conversation I think it's going to be pretty unrepeatable in the years ahead. So we'll see. I'm a little bit intimidated by what the maintenance budget might look like, so that's why I'm working on getting that LX 450 into a daily driver. I'll sell my E91 to be that's going to provide the maintenance
Funniest.
budget. So hopefully it all comes. I mean, this is coming, but I'm hoping the other pieces come together so I don't lose my shirt on it.
Dude, that's awesome. I see we don't have a ton of time. Hey, if we go over time, does it kick us out?
I think it stops. It stops.
Okay.
So
If you're not feeling too overwhelmed tomorrow, shoot me a text.
yeah,
I'd love to come by. But if you get the car and you're kind of like, okay, I got to get